Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Final Trade. Today we have a hilarious mono blue deck called Frantic Storm, which uses the hopelessly broken Storm mechanic to mill your opponent to death. So, Storm was not a keyword that was in the game when I played originally in high school. It came along a little later. And when I got back into the game a little while back, the first time I picked up a card with Storm on it and I read this keyword, I didn't think, how did this ever get released? And I didn't think, how did this get out of playtesting? I didn't think, how did this get out of R&D into playtesting at WotC? What I thought was, how did this even get into R&D? It was unbelievable that anybody who ever designed a card for Magic the Gathering could have thought of the Storm mechanic and thought, it'll be fine. And, this won't hopelessly break any card that it's put on. And, even in the era that I played, way back up to about 1999, there were a lot of infinite combos in the game that you could exploit. And so if you fast forward several more years to when the storm keyword is introduced to the game, there are going to be even more infinite combos that you can use to gin up infinite mana, or in the case of this deck, just a ton of mana. And so how does this get enough mana in order to exploit the storm effect to create copies of Brain Freeze to mill your opponent to death? Well, the first thing it does is Helm of Awakening and Sapphire Medallion, of course. Yeah, your opponent's spells are going to cost less mana too, but who cares? If you get 2 Helms of Awakening out, then the rest of your Helms and your Medallions are all free, and they all still count as casting a spell. So you'll get the casting cost of almost everything in this deck down to just 1 blue mana. In fact, there's only 1 card in the deck that takes 2 blue mana. It's Turnabout way down here, but it's worth it. Then what you need to do is draw a lot of cards. So you're playing cards to draw cards to be able to play more cards, to draw more cards. And the whole time you're doing this, you're powering up that storm effect by playing more spells. So you're just accumulating played spells. So you have a couple pretty basic ones. Draw 2 cards and put 1 in your hand and 1 on the bottom of your library. And the other one, just draw 2 cards. Oh, the other player gets to draw a card. Big deal. The nice thing about these 2 cards is you can play them before the turn in which you're going to try to spin up the storm combo and win the game. And so the early turns of this deck, you just play land. If you have either the Helm or the Medallion, you go ahead and play them. And you go ahead and play any copies of Sleight of Hand or Words of Wisdom that you have just to get some more cards so that you can get this combo rolling. And then at some point, typically once you have 4 land out, 4 is a really nice spot. It's possible and it works well with 3, but 4 is really nice. Then you commit and you just start playing spells and hoping you keep the draws going correctly and grabbing the right cards out of your library in order to build up to be able to cast the Brain Freeze and have the Storm ability charged up enough that you can win. And so how do you try to do this? Well, here's a great one. If you've got a couple of those spell cost reduction artifacts in play, then Meditate costs 1 mana and gives you 4 cards. Okay, so you skip your next turn, but you really don't care because you're going to win on the turn that you're executing this combo. And so sometimes you'll end up casting Meditate 5 or 6 or 7 times. Okay, so you skip your next 7 turns, but the game's over. Now, this is the real important card. Draw 2, then discard 2, but untap up to 3 lands. And this is why you really need 3 lands in play for this combo to go off. And like I said, 4 is nice, because if you start a turn with 3, you play a 4th island, and then you start executing the combo, your success rate will go way up. And so this is really one of the key cards because you get to untap those lands, which means every time you play this, not only do you accumulate another spell played for Storm, but you can play 3 more spells because you've untapped 3 lands. And now you have Merchant Scroll so that you can go into your deck and search out those instants. And by the way, Frantic Search and Words of Wisdom and Meditate are all instants that you can search for. And those are all critical cards to the combo. So then you have Recall. Of course, Recall lets you pull cards back from your graveyard to your hand to play them again. Most of the time when you play Recall, you're going to be grabbing a bunch of Frantic Searches and then some meditates. So if you don't have enough frantic searches in your graveyard to exhaust your recall, you can add meditates to what you're bringing back. And now this benefits from these cost reduction artifacts. And the other nice thing is, as you're playing all these draw cards, you're going to be pulling more islands into your hand. And of course, you can only play one per turn. So you'll have a bunch of islands in your hand, which you'll discard with recall. And that's what you typically discard with frantic search. You just go ahead and toss away useless islands. So those work together really well. Here's Turnabout. It's the only one that ends up still costing 2 mana once you have at least 2 of those mana reduction artifacts out. And it untaps all of your lands, and that's what you really want to use this for. So that's why I say having 4 islands is nice, because this nets you 2 mana. Fact or Fiction is okay. I've used it in playing this deck, but I kind of think I'm going to replace it with another copy of Turnabout. Really what Fact or Fiction is in there for is to try to dig down in your library and hopefully get the last card you need to start the combo. And so, or to dig something and get it put in your graveyard for a recall, but it's just kind of an inefficient way of doing those things. Arcane Denial, 2 copies, just so you have a counter spell to protect your Brain Freeze when you finally fire it off. And of course, you wanted a counter spell that was a blue and colorless, so its cost could get reduced down to just a blue. And the nice thing is, you may be able to counter something early in the game and draw an extra card if you need to. Then, of course, Lotus Petal. Oh boy. 0 casting cost, so it's a free spell that still powers up your Storm, and it'll help get you over the hump sometimes when you're playing out your combo and you just need 1 more mana. So, really useful. This deck is kind of hilarious to play. There was one game I was playing this where I cast 27 spells, and then I had all 4 Brain Freezes in my hand, and I had enough mana through untapped islands and Lotus Petals. And so, that first 27 spell Storm plus the Brain Freeze that actually casts it would be 84 cards milled from your opponent's deck. And then the second one is 87, and the third is 90, and the fourth is 93. So you're forcing your opponent to mill almost 400 cards off of their deck. And, you don't need anywhere near that kind of combo success with this deck in order to win. Typically, you need to just mill down, about 50 cards or so, because you're probably on turn 3 or 4, and you're firing off this combo. So it's a really funny deck, and I've always wanted to build a fun mill deck, but every time I thought about them, my mind went to things like Grindstone and Millstone and stuff like that. But, using this unbelievably broken Storm keyword is really the way to go, and it's a whole lot of fun. So if you like this kind of thing, these old pre-modern decks, sometimes I do vintage era decks, sometimes it's just decks that's all retro frame cards. So if you like that kind of thing, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Join me on Final Trade. Thanks a lot.